Hello folks, this is Steve A. for you. So I'm sitting here looking at the stuff online that I usually look at, and I'm going to retrace for you a little bit of searching that I did. I can't get over how when I read something now, I can connect it to something I did, saw, or someone I met a long time ago. For example, in this past year I posted a video, and when I saw a picture of the newly elected Vice President of the United States and his wife, I'm giving the example of what I mean by connections. A picture of the Vice President of the United States and his wife, I looked at his wife and I thought, she looks like she's Indian. So I checked it out, and sure enough, she is American born of Indian immigrants, and her mother is a provost at one of the University of California campuses. And when I went to the page for her, it was on the Faculty of Molecular Genetics, and I saw her mother's picture, and in all the pictures of the co-faculty members, there was somebody that I went to school with in the early 1980s, who's now a distinguished professor and senior colleague of the mother of the wife of the Vice President of the United States. Now let me show you something like that. So a while ago, as I do every day at least once, I went to the Times of Israel, which is an English language news site from Israel, and I'm looking through the articles, latest articles, and I see this one. Man charged with killing his mother. But then it says, the daughter of famed Noahide archaeologist, and that's why I looked at it. I wanted to know, given how old she looks, and she's the daughter of an archaeologist, I was wondering, now let me see, so I looked. Sarah Richardson, the daughter of enigmatic Noahide archaeologist Vendell Jones, Indiana Jones. In my reading, I find that he claims that the Indiana Jones character is based on him. Now, he's deceased. She's been murdered. Sarah, just in a day or so ago, in the West Bank, Sarah Richardson, the daughter of enigmatic Noahide archaeologist Vendell Jones, was found dead in her West Bank home in late May. Police who arrived at the small settlement the morning of the 73-year-old woman's death found her son digging a hole in a nearby garden, presumably to bury her without telling anybody. So you see what I have highlighted to do a search with Google. I'm wondering, who's that guy? Now, I'll be explaining why the fact that she's the daughter of an archaeologist, I was attracted to follow this So it's no problem finding his name in the search, and there's a Wikipedia article about him. He was born in 1930, an American Noahide scholar, whatever that is. Noahidism is a monotheistic Jewish religious movement, first time reading it, aimed at non-Jews based on the 7 laws of Noah. Remember Noah and the Ark? And their traditional interpretations within Orthodox Judaism. Okay. So he was some kind of Christian evangelist about Jewish roots, I'll take it to be. Was an American Noahide scholar who directed archaeological searches for biblical artifacts such as the Ark of the Covenant. Where is the Ark of the Covenant? It used to be in the temple in Jerusalem. So he was born in Texas, bachelor's degree in divinity, master's degree in theology, Baptist College, theological seminary, pastor of a church in Tennessee. He resigns, blah, 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 blah. And then we get this. Moved to Israel in April 1967, just before the June the 7th Six-Day War. Remember a few days ago that I put up a video how on the morning where we heard the news that the Six-Day War had started on June the 7th, 1967, I was living in Philadelphia and I drove from Germantown to the pharmaceutical company where I was working at 15th and West Spring Garden Street. And in mid-morning, around somewhere between 10 and 11 in the morning, working in a laboratory up there, suddenly all the electricity goes off and we discover there's a major electrical blackout, and what's going through our heads is this the first impact of a nuclear exchange between Russia and the United States caused by the start of the Six-Day War? So a few months before the start of the Six-Day War, this guy, in April '67, moved his family to Israel to continue his studies in the Department of Judaica at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Was it in the new city or was it on the campus in the enclave in Jordanian occupied Old City, overlooking the Old City on the temple? Here Jones became involved in archaeological aspects of Israel. He aided the Israeli army during the Six-Day War, probably in Jerusalem, I'm guessing. I knew people who fought to recapture the Old City. I knew the father of one who died in the attack to get into the city. His assistance was in the role of being a spotter, since his color blindness allowed him to spot camouflage. After the Six-Day War, he was on the Steckol-Haas excavation team at Qumran, authorized by the Jordanian Department of Antiquities before the war. Shortly thereafter, Vendel's excavations were continued under Israeli authority through the status quo law. Now, we're going to expand on that. So I'm telling you how an American got to Jerusalem just before the Six-Day War, and he immediately was involved by where he was with some excavations at Qumran. Did Jesus visit Qumran? John the Baptist was from Qumran. Who were the Essenes at Qumran? Dead Sea Scrolls. Why were they there and not worshiping in Jerusalem? Do you remember all that stuff? Now, after the 6-Day War, I quit my job in like September or October. I quit my job at that pharmaceutical company and I went to Israel. Because I thought, I visited Israel briefly for a few days in my travels in 1966, the year before. I had been in Jerusalem. I passed through the Mandelbaum Gate. I'd been a few days in Israel, and then I went back to Europe on a Turkish liner. And I thought, what did I miss? So after the 6-Day War, late in 1967, I went back to Israel as a mitnadev, a volunteer. And it was a big propaganda effort for people like me, these mitnadvim who came from all over after the war, thousands of them. And they wanted to indoctrinate them, and I was invited to go to, among other things, it was a 2 or 3 day lecture series in Jerusalem. And one of the lectures was given by an archaeologist who had excavated several graves at Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls had been discovered. And by the way, I've seen one of the Dead Sea Scrolls in a museum in Jerusalem, and I could even partially read some of it. So I attended a small 20 people lecture in Jerusalem in the winter of 67, 68, given by an archaeologist who had excavated several graves at Qumran. And he told us that he started doing that before the war. He was on the Israeli side, but he had the personal permission of King Hussein, amateur radio operator JY1. I've heard him once on this 20-meter band. He had the personal permission of King Hussein himself to be allowed to cross at the Mandelbaum Gate into Jordanian-occupied Jerusalem, and then to go down in Jordanian-occupied territory to Qumran to do the excavations. I'm giving you why I had begun to follow this when I saw this article that said the daughter of one of the people doing the excavations at Qumran while it was under Jordanian authority and then afterwards. So I'm following the trail. But the person who gave the lecture wasn't the guy that Indiana Jones was modeled on. It wasn't Vendale Jones. Jones also claimed to have been the subject of the movie script that was circulated in Hollywood and which he claimed inspired the character of Indiana Jones. It's right there. That was his claim. Everybody's seen those movies. So, He's moved to Israel. After the Six-Day War, he was on the Steckel/Haas excavation team at Qumran. So now I have a link to finding the name of the person whose lecture I attended in Jerusalem in the winter of 67-68. Because it was a person who led that excavation. And so clearly it wasn't this guy, but it was either Steckel or Haas. After the Six-Day War, this guy Jones was on the Steckel-Haas excavation team at Qumran, authorized by the Jordanian Department of Antiquities before the war, more specifically by the King of Jordan himself. How could they make a connection like that? Well, King Hussein had a very international education, including extensive training in the UK. But apparently, Vendel's excavation took over afterwards because of some dispute. Now watch. I'm interested in either Steckel or Haas. So first I went after Steckel. Now this is the Israeli Parks Commission website for Qumran, which is a tourist site today. I want you to see what it looks like now, bird's eye view. You see the caves, that's where they found some of the things. This is the Qumran community, but you see it excavated, and you can see that there's walks around, which means this now has been built up as a tourist site. But when I was there, a few weeks after attending that lecture, I left the kibbutz for a day. I went to Jerusalem. I got a bus down through the Valley of Death, the bus that goes to the Jericho Road, but then turns south toward the Dead Sea. And then when I got to a place where there was the entrance to the Qumran, there was just a road sign. I had told the driver to watch for it. That's where I wanted to get off. It was a no place in those days. Now it's a big tourist attraction, especially to Christians. When I got there and walked up the dirt road, all I saw was what the archaeologists in the lecture had described, that there was a large cemetery, that you could see that people had been buried there, that there were at least two sections of it that were not quite aligned the same. And he was the person that had excavated several graves. And when I got there a few weeks later, I could see the several graves that had been excavated because they were filled in and you could tell they had been dug out, unlike the hundreds of other ones that you knew were graves by the various kinds of small headstones. So what he had described a few weeks later, I saw. So I did a search on Steckel/Haas excavation team at Qumran to show you how I did this. And I started searching through the articles that it came up with. And here's this one, the Bulletin of the History of Archaeology. It's in the section Underground Archaeological Research in West Bank, 1948 to 1967, Management Complexity and Israeli Involvement. That's the title. And as I'm going down through this, Here's Qumran. There's Jerusalem. You can see the old armistice line. There's Bethlehem. I visited Bethlehem in 1966. I was in Manger Square for Christmas Eve in 1967 under Israeli administration, and again in 1971. I went down through the Valley of Death, as is mentioned in the Bible, but the bus didn't go to Jericho. It went south, and I got off at Qumran, and it was going down to Engedi. The bus was actually going to Why is this giving me trouble? Why did it do that? Excuse me. The way they do these websites. So wait a minute. See, I had something marked. Browser and HTML writers are overly clever. This is the part I want. So I enlarge it so it moves it. These people are so stupid, it's incredible. The people who do this, who figured the logic of this, don't do that. Don't do that. Everything you click, it moves you somewhere else. Okay. Solomon Steckel, the nuclear reactor, and the research of foreign foundations. The final excavation undertaken in the Qumran region under Jordanian rule, which would be the time up to just after the Six-Day War in June 1967, and then it became, because of the territory captured in the West Bank and South by Israel, it then became Israeli authority instead of Jordanian authority. The final excavation undertaken in Qumran region under Jordanian rule just before the Six-Day War was Solomon Steckel's excavation of 9 graves in the cemetery of Qumran between 1966 and 1967. So that is the person who gave the lecture. Steckel was not an archaeologist by profession, but rather a Canadian Jew engaged primarily in journalistic writing for the Toronto Star, who appears to have concealed his Jewish identity from Jordanian authorities. This other guy referred to him derogatorily as the Sherlock Holmes of archaeology, and somebody else characterized him as an adventurer. Steckel's excavation was considered to be unprofessional, and various researchers have been critical of him, particularly for not indicating the location of the graves he excavated, which means he didn't have however navigators did it were looking at the stars. But I'm telling you that after attending the lecture in the winter of 67, 68, and going down there myself a few weeks later, I saw the graves specifically that he and the others with him had excavated. And I remember he said, and he said this is close to the way graves are done today. The graves were all approximately 6 feet deep. all of the graves were aligned in the same direction. And the several graves that they excavated all had the same characteristic. They were 6 feet deep. They were about the size of what gets dug right across here at the cemetery at that church. But at the bottom of the grave was not the body, the skeleton. At the bottom of the grave, when they dug down, there was no skeleton, no remains. Instead, there were 3 flat stones, all always of the same 3 shapes, fit together on the wall facing to the east at the bottom of the grave. And when you took those stones away, that's where the person was put in a little alcove. And they were laid out with their head to the northwest, feet to the southeast, and their head was turned to look to the east. Where did Abraham come from originally? If you know the answer to that, then what we're saying is that those people at Qumran remembered their origins. They weren't native forever from there. They came from, you should be able to answer that. So that was what he described to us as what he found in the grave, each of the graves. And he didn't excavate the whole cemetery, but he excavated approximately the number that are mentioned here. And I found them, but of course they were filled back in. And I'm almost certain that the person that gave that lecture that day and showed us the slides, which is why I didn't have any trouble finding the graves and knowing that they were the ones he had excavated. Solomon H. Steckel was a South African journalist. Oh, another journalist with an interest in ancient Jewish matters. He carried out excavations in Qumran Cemetery and later wrote books about the Jerusalem Temple and the gates of Jerusalem. In 1966, Steckel obtained permission from the Jordanian Antiquities Department to investigate the Qumran Cemetery, opening, this is 1966, opening 2 of the tombs and recovering 2 male skeletons. And I just described to you what the bottom of the grave looked like and how the skeletons were not at the bottom of the grave where we would put them in that cemetery over there, but in an alcove to the east side of it, lying in a certain way looking east. Then in 1967, he opened a further 8 tombs, and that follows what he said. He told us the first excavations he did with the permission of the King of Jordan was before the war. And then he did some more immediately after the war. This is the person I met. He's the one that gave the lecture. He opened a further 8 tombs, recovering 5 male and 3 female skeletons. When Israel took control of the West Bank, Steckel lost his rights to excavate the cemetery. The authorities of Israel occupation have forbidden this Sherlock Holmes of archaeology to continue his researches at Qumran. Now, I want to speculate on why. Remember that immediately after the takeover by the Israelis, there's a lot of chaos. Then Israel has to set up an administrative structure in the whole of the West Bank and further south along the Dead Sea. So he was able to go during that short period, but then he was cut off. And this other guy instead got to take over. And he was on the team that went those 2 times under Steckel, the Baptist from the United States, whose daughter was murdered, the Indiana Jones guy. So why would they have been suspicious of him and stopped him? My guess is because he probably blurted out that he actually got his permission from the King of Jordan and they wanted to cut that off right away. Was he a spy? Who was he more loyal to? You've just overtaken a few million people, inhabitants that are hostile. You follow what I'm saying? So, excuse my long thing, but I wonder about my life and the random path I've taken, that I can do as I usually do, go to the Times of Israel to get the latest Israeli news, be scrolling down, see an article that normally I wouldn't be interested in because it's just about some murder, except it mentions the word archaeologist, and it's clear she's old, so the archaeologist must have been from way before, and I remember the lecture in Jerusalem and then going down to Qumran, so I decide to follow it, and Shazam! The father of this murdered woman was a member of the team led by the person who gave the lecture in Jerusalem that I attended in the winter of 67 and 68, which I infer from online evidence. And I was one of the very earliest tourist visitors to Qumran after the 6-Day War, because it's clear that there was hardly any tourist traffic there under Jordanian control. In contrast to today, where it's a big deal. Gotta go. Steve A. before ya, just reminiscing, saying see you in 73.